Recently, I was invited to give a talk at the Charlene Arcilla Trans Wellness Collective Symposium at Temple University in Philadelphia. When I asked the newsletter subscribers amongst you if you would be interested in seeing a recorded version of the talk, I got such an overwhelming positive response that I had to give it to you. So even if you haven't subscribed yet, stick around because you're in the right place. Hi, I'm Renee, and I'm a gender-affirming voice teacher. This year's symposium theme was Rooted in Resilience, Nourished by Care. And the talk I put together was called Sounding Like Ourselves, Trans Voice Work as Resistance and Self-Care. Now, the live version of this talk involved a lot of audience participation, which is great, but I also want to be respectful of everyone's privacy, especially since we currently live in... which means I couldn't record the talk in Philly and share that here. But through the magic of cinema, I have instead created a pre-recorded version of the talk. And one last thing before we roll it. It brings me a lot of joy to come out into the community and give these kinds of talks. So if you want me to come to your university or organization, please contact me at the link below. And I don't know if you've noticed, but I don't live in Philly, so give it a shot even if you don't live in my slice of the land of maple syrup and poutine. Now, without further ado, enjoy Sounding Like Ourselves, Trans Voice Work as Resistance and Self-Care. Hello, and welcome to Sounding Like Ourselves, Trans Voice Work as Resistance and Self-Care. So as I just said in the intro, this is a talk that I created for the Charlene Arcilla Trans Wellness Collective, formerly known as the Philadelphia Trans Wellness Conference. And I got so much feedback in my newsletter that people wanted to see a pre-recorded version of this talk. So that is what we are doing here today. Before we start, let's just look at the agenda for today. So we're gonna start with a little welcome moment. So if this is your first video that you're watching of mine, my first YouTube video, you're gonna get to know a little bit about me. And if you wanna skip that, I'm gonna put all the chapters below so you can choose what parts you wanna see. You can skip this part if you want. Then we're gonna talk about why voice matters, how voice is gendered, policed, and most importantly, reclaimable. Then we're gonna look as voice as resistance and care, and also self-care. And in that section, we're gonna look at all the reasons why people voice train. Some of them may surprise you. Then there'll be a little warm up, and then we're gonna have some try it yourself practice. So this is gentle and optional. You don't have to do this part, but I highly recommend it. And most importantly, no experience is needed. And with that, let's get into it. So a little bit about me. Let me just move my face out of the way. So my name is Renee. I am a non-binary trans person. My pronouns are they and them. And if this is not your first video of mine and you've commented with she, it's they, them. I'm a voice teacher specializing in gender-affirming voice care, which you might see abbreviated as GAVC. Unlike some gender-affirming voice care providers who have backgrounds in speech-language pathology, I have backgrounds in physics, jazz voice, and songwriting. My first degree was in physics, then I did a music degree in jazz voice, and then I got a master's in songwriting. So I come at this from a voice pedagogy, like a music background, which makes my approach a little bit more exploratory, maybe a little bit more like sound focused as opposed to like medical, but you know, there's lots of overlap in these fields, and there's no one true way to do trans voice training. I am disabled with chronic pain. This might not be important to you, but accessibility is at the heart of everything I create, which is why you'll see my videos are always captioned, and I do my best to make sure things are as accessible as possible. For instance, there will be no animations. Like, I could have easily animated everything on this page, but I try to keep the animations to a minimum, both on my website and here. There's just so many things when it comes to accessibility to keep in mind, and I think it's really, really important. Next, over 1,500 trans students have taken my online courses. So my online courses include mindful voice feminization, masculinize your voice without testosterone, and mix and match designing your non-binary voice. But those are just my paid programs. Hundreds of thousands more trans people have accessed my free resources, which I'll talk about in a minute. If you want to know more about my courses, you can check them out at reneeyoxon.com/store or check them out at this QR code. Just to briefly recap what I have mindful voice feminization, which is this one here. And this is where I help students to raise, brighten, and lighten the sound of the voice. And while the focus is to help students sound more quote unquote feminine, a big part of this course is also focused on self-love and being gentle with yourself throughout the process, which can be very taxing emotionally. Then masculinize your voice without testosterone. This is the course where I prove that you do not need to take hormones in order to get that masculine sounding voice that you desire. Although I am obviously very pro hormones. Go hormones. And then lastly, I have mix and match, designing your non-binary voice. This is my newest course, and I believe it is the only one of its kind in the world. As a non-binary person myself, I wanted to create a program that will train students in all the gendered aspects of the voice and will let them play so that they can create a voice that is as unique as their gender, which is actually my goal for everyone in all of my courses. So as I said, if you want more information about that, you can grab it at the QR code here or at reneeyoxon.com, and also I will link it below in the description. In addition to my available courses, I want to talk about how I support the trans community in my work, because I believe if you're making money off the backs of trans people, you got to be giving back a lot, which I've spoken about many times in many YouTube videos. So the first thing I have available is my free resource library. I have a feeling lots of people on YouTube have not checked this out, and if that's you, get into it, okay? It's at reneeyoxon.com/freebies. It's right in there in my navigation bar, and there's tons of things you can get for free. There's a warm-up, there's anatomy guides, there's a bunch of like practice log templates and tracking tools. There's a practice games ebook. There's some other workshops like the one I'm recording right now. Check out the freebies library. I promise there's lots of stuff there. Then there's my scholarship program. Another thing I don't think people are aware about, but I want to make people aware of. I offer free and subsidized places in all of my courses that I just told you about to trans people facing financial barriers. So it's so easy to apply. You like fill out a little form on my website, and then it will email you a link to an assessment where you can tell me which course you want, how much subsidy you want, and also offer feedback of resources that you would like to see. And there's no like application process, like it's just first come, first serve. So if you apply, eventually you will get it. It does take about 6 months though at the time of recording. It could be longer when you're watching this, or shorter. Apply though, if you're wondering. Then of course I have my YouTube channel where I share educational content, voice exercises, and affirming advice. I'm committed to making weekly videos. Me and T bust our humps to make these videos as educational and engaging as we can. I don't expect everyone to get into my courses, and I want those who have no interest in buying an online course to still have access to what they need. That's me. Then I have my weekly newsletter where I share the weekly video. So if you want to get like a notice of the weekly YouTube video in your inbox, you can get it there. And with that, I like write voice tips and I share a bunch of things. Like just in the last week, I shared a link to a submission form for an anthology of trans writing about hope that I'm applying to, and I encourage my subscribers to apply to. Last week, I gave a bunch of podcasts that I had been listening to and had been featured on for you to listen to. It's a great newsletter. All my people who I talk to are saying that that's one of their favorite newsletters. So please get on my newsletter. It's so cool. And then I also offer low barrier access to support. So I try to do free webinars, talks like the one I did in Philadelphia. I try and collaborate with community organizations and community groups to bring more free resources into the community. Yeah, and then also I offer a teacher training. So over 100 gender-affirming voice care providers have been trained through my program as of this year to better serve trans students with compassion and skill. And this will come out It'll be September of 2025. So the next cohort's applications will open in January of 2026. So if you're interested in learning how to teach gender-affirming voice, you can do that with me. It's a great course, and I offer discounts to trans and gender diverse folks who want to take the program. So that is how I support the trans community, and that's the welcome. Now you know me. Now let's move on to why voice matters. Now, you may be here watching this talk because you are trans and you are exploring your voice, or maybe you're like me and you're already a gender-affirming voice care provider. Maybe you're here and voice is already an important part of your lived reality. I suspect it is because the people who are subscribed to me already are aware of voice. But when I tell like a cab driver or a stranger at a dinner party, or even other queer and trans people, honestly, that I'm a gender-affirming voice teacher, I often get this response that's like, oh my gosh, wow, I did not even know that that was a thing. Both inside and outside of trans communities, behavioral voice change, which is to say voice alteration through behavior alone without hormones or surgery, is still quite misunderstood, or in some cases not known about at all. But before we get into more voice specific stuff, I actually want to zoom out and talk about change and bodily autonomy in general, okay? I'm gonna actually make myself big for a second. So when we're becoming ourselves, so whether we're coming of age or we're transitioning or we're simply doing like some inner work at any stage in our life, it involves usually change. And trans people know this intuitively. You can change your appearance, you can get a new haircut or a new outfit or something. You can also take up the trombone, or you can start writing poetry, or you can learn to ride a bike. Or you can go on hormone replacement therapy, or you can have gender-affirming surgery. We'll bring my slides back here. And by the way, I have had 2 gender-affirming surgeries in the last 2 years. In 2023, I had a hysterectomy, best decision of my life. And then, in 2024, I had my hysterectomy. In 2023, I had my top surgery, which you can see I'm featured here on this slide. This was like this was like days after I had top surgery. And both surgeries were meaningful changes that made me feel way more at home in my body, okay? And also, I have had every haircut a person can have. I know everyone like associates me with the long curls, but actually for most of my life, I've had short hair. And I've had different things shaved, and I've had shaved heads, and I've had dyed hair, and I've had bangs and no bang. You know, I've done it all. I think we can agree that some of these haircuts on this slide look better than others to you. I don't know your opinion on these things. It's subjective completely. But none of them are inherently superior to others, right? It's just hair. But depending on who you are and the people in your life, some changes will be more socially acceptable than others. If you come from somewhere that enforces a strict gender binary of women having long hair and men having short hair, then some hairstyles will be more or less socially acceptable for you, right? And I think that thinking about change on this continuum here, from less socially acceptable to more socially acceptable, can really help us to understand the absurdity of how some changes are celebrated and others are condemned. Take, for example, my mom. Now, in the original version of this talk, I had an actual picture of my mom, but I removed it for privacy reasons. But she does kind of look like this. Now, my mom does not care what kind of haircut I have, okay? I could shave my head bald or dye it purple, and she's like, as long as you're happy. She does not care what my hair looks like. Shout out my mom, you're a real one. But she has a hard time with my tattoos, y'all. Every time I get one, she's like, okay, I guess that's fine. Like, they're less acceptable for her, right? And face tattoos, forget about it. I will probably never get a face tattoo. That just not something that I want. But if I ever got one, my mom would have a very, very hard time with that. And then when we talk about surgery, my mom was initially challenged. I will not say she was unaccepting, but she was a little bit challenged by my desire to get top surgery. And I think that those challenges came from fear of like doing general anesthesia, just surgery in general, like doing a quote unquote elective surgery. Like she was scared for me, you know? But as time went on, she grew to really be one of my biggest supporters of my top surgery. And she even took care of me during my recovery, y'all. She spent 10 days here. I don't have a spare bedroom. We like put a mattress on the floor. We just moved the table out of the way. And she slept here on the floor so that I could sleep in my bed while recovering from surgery. This woman, not only did she change my drains, she also took my drains out when it was time to take them out. You're supposed to get a nurse to do that, but my mom was a nurse all of her life. So the night before my drains were coming out, I caught her YouTubing how to remove Jackson Pratt drains. But we had a lovely time together. It was like a nice bonding experience, very, very sweet. And so the more we play with this scale, right, the more arbitrary things seem to get. So let's just talk, we're gonna get back to voice, but let's just talk about this just a little bit longer, okay? Cis hetero patriarchy in general is obviously fine with the concept of haircuts. Like you can cut your hair. People, I mean, depending on your culture, right? Some cultures are not okay with haircuts in general. But let's just say in my culture, people are fine with getting your hair cut. But they're not so fine with gender non-conforming haircuts. They might be okay with it, maybe a little ambivalent, but definitely moving this direction towards less acceptable. And then even less so with haircuts for the purpose of transition, right? It's one thing to have a gender non-conforming haircut, to be a woman with short hair, but if you want to be a man, you're getting your haircut to affirm your gender. Now suddenly this haircut is even less acceptable. Or they may feel ambivalent about breast augmentation in general, unless a trans woman wants one, and then it's unacceptable. Or a cis woman wants one who's a cancer survivor, you know, now it's acceptable again, right? And this phenomenon of trans people being condemned for accessing services that cis people are accepted or even celebrated for accessing will probably not be new information for the trans people in the chat and for those of you watching here today. But the point I'm trying to make is that things fall on this scale depending on who you ask, right? What the context is, how zoomed in or zoomed out you get, like if you're talking about your mom or the moms in your city, right? But okay, let's bring it back to the voice. Cis, hetero, patriarchal society, the hierarchy, is actually fine with voice modification, but only under very narrow, high control conditions. So they're fine with people learning to sing or to voice act. They're fine with public speaking coaches teaching you to project confidence. They're fine with newscasters learning how to speak in a particular way. They're fine with therapists helping someone with a stutter or a vocal tremor. But they're not so fine with people, especially marginalized people, changing their voices to feel more affirmed or more like themselves, right? And I represented that with me. I didn't have a good picture for that, sorry. But even cis people are not actually free to explore their voices for the purpose of self-actualization, right? You know, cis women who speak too high are called shrill, speak too low when you're trying too hard. Don't even get me started on like podcasts where women have vocal fry. If you just go and look at the comments on A Little Bit Fruity, and you'll see what I'm talking about. And you can also remember the case of Elizabeth Holmes, who was vilified for her crimes, but also for intentionally lowering her voice, even though powerful men are trained to speak that way all the time. And also think about like the hate directed at people with quote unquote gay voice, women with vocal fry, or Black speakers who get coached out of African-American vernacular English to appear more quote unquote professional in white institutions. By the way, if you're interested in hearing my hot takes about Elizabeth Holmes, I made a little mini video essay that you can check out, and I have linked it below. Now, the point I'm trying to make here is that voice has never been politically neutral, okay? It's always been tied up with power. Who gets to sound credible, desirable, employable, or even human, right? And when trans people step into that space, when we consciously choose to alter our voices, both to survive and to thrive, suddenly it's quote unquote fake or unnatural. We're being deceptive. Big air quotes around all these words in case you're just listening for some reason. But if you take only one thing home from this talk, okay, you already are home, so if you take it to the home in your mind, I want it to be this. The voice is flexible, expressive, adaptive, contextual, and shifting constantly, okay? The voice is flexible, expressive, adaptive, contextual, and shifting constantly. Everybody's voice. Your voice is not fixed and it's not static. It reflects the people who raised you, the languages you speak, the places you've lived, and the ways you've learned to stay safe, frankly. Studies have shown that babies, this is fascinating, babies actually start developing their accents in the womb. So based on the language they hear in utero, they come out crying with like either a descending or an ascending cadence. Amazing. Studies also show that bilingual people or multilingual people have different average pitches for the languages they speak. So when I speak English, I have one average pitch. When I speak French and Spanish, I have different average pitches. Studies also show that average pitch has dropped significantly over the last 100 years for white cis men and women in English-speaking countries. That group is chosen because that is what the study says, that the average pitch, when you compare different studies over 100 years, has dropped. And there is no physiological reason to explain this pitch drop, only behavioral reasons. And this means behavior matters quite a lot. And that means voice is learned. Behavior is something we learn, right? We learn how to speak based on all the things I've already said. And what can be learned can be unlearned and adapted and chosen consciously. It's one of the only good parts about being an adult with autonomy is you get to choose your character design stuff, you know what I mean? So, I don't have my water bottle, this is horrible. So, if the voice you have today is one you developed out of survival, okay, or social expectation, what might it mean to create a voice that feels like home to you, right? Here's what I believe sincerely. Anyone has the power to shape their voice, whether that's through behavior, technique, tools, or choices about how we choose to speak, right? And whether or not that change is deemed acceptable, it doesn't change that power, okay? You don't need to wait for permission. We don't need to wait for permission to sound like ourselves. Which brings us to voice as resistance and self-care. So, if voice isn't fixed and we're already adapting it every day, what does it mean to consciously change it, especially as a trans person? That is what I want to turn to now. Okay, so this next slide, it's got a lot to say, so I'm going to say it slow. Oh no, am I covering a word? No, you can see everything. So, voice is the site of radical bodily autonomy and a rich, barrier-free zone for gender exploration. Okay, I'm going to say that one more time. Voice is the site of radical bodily autonomy and a rich, barrier-free zone for gender exploration. It's a part of the body and your gender expression that can change without access to medication, surgery, a formal diagnosis. You don't need a prescription to start voice training. You don't need permission. You don't even need to be out, frankly. You can just play, you can just try. And because of that, voice can become a real space of freedom, especially when other parts of transition feel like too risky or too expensive or too medicalized or just too far off in the distance. And what I've seen in my practice, especially in students who are like early in their transition or still questioning, is that voice work can become the spark that moves people forward. I definitely have seen people who have started voice training like, oh, I just wanted to try it out, and then next thing I know, I'm on HRT, I'm trans, you know. Or I've seen people, especially in my comment section, who are like, I'm just here to learn how to be a better DM for D&D. That's fine. There is no wrong reason to voice train. Oh, I'm just trying to freak out my friends. Okay, girl, that's okay too. But also, on the other hand, I have seen people say that voice training made me realize that I was changing my voice to conform to the expectations of others. And actually, I like my voice how it is. That's okay too. Whether it leads you into other transition steps or helps you feel content without them, voice work can be a moment of liberation, right? So this next part of this section, I want to talk about what voice training can do for those who engage with it. When people think about trans voice training, they often think about like fixing something that's broken or wrong. But for many of my students, once they really start to get into it, voice work is less about fixing something broken and more about freeing something up, right? Freeing up emotion and expression and creativity and comfort and possibility and gender expression and all that wibbly wobbly good human stuff. So we're gonna look at 5 reasons people voice train. So we're gonna start with the most common reason that people think of when they think of reasons to voice train, and that is voice dysphoria. As you likely already know, this is when someone's voice feels out of sync with their inner sense of gender. So for example, you might feel a sense of disconnect when you hear your voice played back on a recording, or maybe it's hard to express yourself fully because hearing your own voice while speaking creates a sense of distress in your body. So this is the most common reason. I'm explaining it in case for some reason somebody doesn't know what voice dysphoria feels like. But voice training can help bridge that gap, obviously, creating a sense of congruence between your voice and your gender identity. And that is where a lot of people feel that gender euphoria feeling that we hear about sometimes. But importantly, dysphoria does not have to be dramatic for it to matter, right? I think a lot of people think that their voice dysphoria is not enough for them to seek out voice training. But even a low level of discomfort can make it hard to feel fully at home in your skin. And I've worked with students who didn't even realize their voice was bothering them until they started training and felt the difference. And just like on a personal note, dysphoria can be sneaky, you know? Like sometimes you don't realize how bad it is until you have the safety and the possibility to change, and then your brain lets you feel what the bad feelings. Like just in my own life, I never really entertained getting top surgery because I had such bad chronic pain that I couldn't like ever imagine accessing surgery when I was already dealing with the medical system so much. So I just kind of put it aside. And then, I don't know, I woke up one day and was like, I'm gonna get top surgery. And then I just started the process. I didn't like spend all day dramatically being sad about my chest. I just knew I wanted it just in one day. And then only in the week before top surgery did I start having like depressive crying jags about my chest. It was like my brain was like, okay, it's safe now to feel these feelings because top surgery is happening in 5 days. Go ahead and be sad about, go ahead and grieve all those years of having a gigantic chest, okay? God's most non-binary soldiers are blessed with the biggest naturals, I swear. Okay, this is getting inappropriate. We gotta move on, we gotta keep it going. So look, if this is you and you're not sure if your dysphoria is like enough to voice train, just give it a try, okay? Because there's no threshold of discomfort that you have to meet before you're allowed to try this. Next, misgendering relief and comfort. So what if you don't feel dysphoric about your voice necessarily? Like you don't hear your voice on recording and it causes you distress, but instead, when you're moving throughout the day, it gets you misgendered. So like on the phone or in your day-to-day life, in your interactions. So in this case, voice training can be like a bra. I guess I can't stop talking about, sorry, like a bra. So one of my students from my course, Mindful Voice Feminization, put it perfectly to me. She said, quote, I want my voice to be like a bra. It's like something I can put on in the morning for support and comfort as I go about my day, and then take off when I'm at home in a safe, relaxing space with people I love. I love that. You know, you want your voice to be something that Makes you feel supported and confident and comfortable and safe wherever you are, just like a bra. And a side note here, some people think that voice training locks you into a voice forever, but that is not true. You can develop a voice that you use when you need it and still keep your old voice for other situations. So if you're worried about losing your old voice, don't worry, because voice switching is totally possible. Like, think about how you switch between the voice you use with your boss and the voice you use with your dog. You do that very naturally. So if you want to have multiple voices for different situations, you absolutely can do that. It just takes a little conscious practice, but it's totally normal and totally doable. It doesn't have to be an all or nothing commitment. This is really just about giving you the tools that work for you to care for yourself in the way that works best. Okay, reason number 3, why folks voice train. Gender fluidity and expression. So if your gender is more fluid or non-binary, voice training can be a way to expand your options in gender expression. So let's say you have femme days or masc days. Maybe you want a voice that feels androgynous no matter what. Why not design a voice that matches your different presentations? So as we were just talking about voice switching, it applies here as well. You can absolutely develop multiple voices and use them in ways that feel authentic to you. I often get this question from DID systems, like, can I have multiple voices for my different members of my system? Yes, like if you spoke 2 languages, you would have sort of 2 voices. So there's no limit to the options you can have. And actually, I'd made a video about Paris Hilton's voice switching. If this is something you want to learn more about, this was like the last short form video we did in vertical format before we switched to this horizontal format. So I'll link this one below as well. That's one of my favorite micro essays. Really, I recommend checking it out. Also, Paris Hilton totally commented on this on TikTok, so highlight of my year. Okay, reason number 4, gender exploration. So sometimes voice training is less about the destination and more about the journey. Maybe you're not sure if fully transitioning, gender nonconformity, or something in the middle is right for you, right? And you're trying out different ways of expressing yourself, like nail polish or growing your hair out or cutting it short or experimenting with your wardrobe. Voice can be another part of that low barrier gender exploration that you do during the questioning period. You don't have to have all the answers to start voice training. And if you want some practical exercises, let me see, can I move myself out of the way here? For going through this exploratory process, if you want some practical exercises for going through the exploratory process, I made a video called How to Pick a Voice That Feels Like You that I think you should check out. Okay, and then the last reason that people often voice train, fun. Stay with me here, folks. You don't need to overthink it, okay? Playing with your voice, whether it's making silly sounds or imitating characters or singing or screaming, it's a joyful, creative thing to do. Like, think about when you were a kid and likely, I don't know you, but maybe you experimented with your voice naturally, right? Like doing funny impressions or pretending to be a cartoon character. I have a very sticky childhood memory of, for some reason, sitting on the toilet, I guess because it was a private space, and just screaming into my closed mouth, like, I don't know why that was such a sensory playtime thing for me as a child, but if you haven't tried it, I recommend it. Scream into your closed mouth. It's a really good time. But that instinct to play is still inside you, even as an adult. And one of the best parts of voice training is that freedom to experiment. So be the cringe you want to see in the world. In these dark and unprecedented times, letting yourself play and explore is a radical act of resistance and self-care, okay? And with that, we are going to do something radical right now and play with our voice. But before we do, I encourage you to take a few extra minutes to warm your voice up right now. So in the original talk, I included the voice warm up, but I want to keep things moving here on YouTube. So I encourage you to pause this video and either do your favorite warm up that you already like. If you haven't done that today, get her done, or check out my free follow along voice warm up routine which I'm showing you here, that I've linked below. So I have like a warm-up routine for all voice goals. You can find the one for you and you can just follow along with me exactly. So you don't have to pause and do your own exercises. You just go ahead and warm up with me in this warm-up routine. Okay, so go ahead and pause and go do that. Okay, you're back. You're all warmed up, right? Right? Then let's continue. Now, I want to do just a little bit of intention setting before we play with our voices. This work can bring up a lot of difficult feelings. I try very hard to keep it like as neutral as possible, but I just want you to repeat after me, okay? This is the voice, body, and energy I have. I will do what I can with what I have today, with as little judgment towards myself and others as possible. I can love myself as I am and still choose to grow, shift, and/or change. I am not doing this alone. Okay, you ready? Let's get into it. So, playtime. Now I don't have slides for all this because I wanted to keep it like kind of loose. So I'm just gonna put myself on screen. So the exercise I wanted to do with everybody today is one that's in all of my courses actually. It's one of my favorites. I learned this as a jazz singer. It was originally designed by Theo Bleckman, who I studied with at the California Jazz Conservatory back in, I don't know, 2017, a long time ago. But it was about like creating vocabulary for vocal improvisation. So it's really good at just playing and freeing. So it's called the sound journal exercise. Now, we're not doing the same exercise that I learned. I've adapted it a little bit. We're gonna start with generating your sound journal. So what I want you to do, we're just gonna close our eyes for 1 second and listen to the space around you. Now, everybody lives everywhere. It's very unlikely you live in like a padded soundproof booth. So likely you'll hear something. If I stop talking, you might have to pause this video. But I want you to try and write down 5 different sounds that you can hear. So for myself, I hear the traffic. Specifically, I hear like a motor idling. Motor idling, I hear someone accelerating. I also hear my computer fan really giving her. I hear my fridge humming. I'm listening for a 5th sound. If I open my window, it would be a lot louder, so. Oh, and I just heard myself burp. Okay, that's 5. Okay, car idling, car accelerating, computer fan, fridge, myself burping. Now you might be hearing other things. Animal sounds, so you might hear birds, a cat, a dog. I don't know if rabbits make sound. You might hear machine sounds like I have, but it might also include microwave beeps or clock beeping or other electric humming. You might hear the sounds of other humans, so footsteps. I hear my chair creaking a little bit as I'm doing this. Just take time to observe what you're hearing in your space. This exercise is also really fun to do on a walk. You know, you can take note of the things you hear. And then what I want you to do is try and imitate the sounds that you've heard, okay? So we're gonna basically be making a big list of sounds, and it can be as long as you are creative. It doesn't have to be, it can be short, long, it can be whatever. Once you've already written down all the sounds you're hearing, you can start to invent some sounds. So one of the ways I like to invent sounds is by singing architecture. This is a little bit abstract, but like, let's say I look at my bike and I imagine what that bike would sound like. So I'm imagining, right? So like the wheels turning, you know. My bike fell down and hit the floor yesterday. That was a sound that I will not forget. I might look at like this plant and, you know, with the falling leaves, and it might have a sound like, ooh, ooh, right? So we've got, you know, these different sounds, and I don't know how you want to write them down. You can do a sound journal with like an actual audio recording. You can write it down on a piece of paper. So I might be like all those 5 that I said, and also the plant sound, and sort of draw what I hear, and the bike sound, and make a drawing like this, right? Get creative with it. So try and imitate these sounds. I'm going to go through and try and make those imitations that I just said. So engine idling was like, nice. Now engine accelerating, whoa, whoa. Fan, shh. Fridge, you might not be able to hear that because it's quite low, but I'm hearing, and then my burping sound was, bah, 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 bah. It had like a tight sound because I was trying to conceal it from y'all. Bah. So that is step 1 and 2, right? Make the list of sounds and imitate those sounds. Okay, so that's step 1 and step 2. Step 3 is to pick one sound from your list and create 3 or more variations. So I'm gonna actually choose the plant sounds. I just think you'll be able to hear it better. Ooh. Now in musical terms, I would call that like a descending gliss. Ooh, on an ooh vowel. Ooh, starting high and going, I don't know, to the middle. So if I had to make 3 variations of the descending plant, there's so many different options we could choose. We could change the pitch, the starting and ending pitch, so I could go ooh or ooh. I could change the resonance. I could make it brighter or darker. Ooh, ooh. I could change the emotion, right? I could make it angry, ooh, or sad, ooh, or playful, ooh. I could change the vowel, ah, ee. I could change how breathy it is, ooh. I could combine some of these things. So angry, breathy, and on E, ee. Right? So I'm pretty deep in this bag at this point. So don't feel bad if you can't come up with as many ideas or variations as I'm able to come up with. I've been living with this exercise for years, and I will make sounds for the things I see on the street as I'm taking a walk, right? It's also a compositional technique, actually. If you're a fledgling composer and you're looking for melody inspirations, you can just like sing the things you see and let the world compose for you, you know? So then I want you to start to ask yourself some questions. Now, everybody hates this part of the exercise because y'all don't like to introspect. And I'm sorry to tell you that it will give you the best results if you do so. So some questions you can ask yourself are, what structures changed when I made a change? So let's just take the descending plant, the original one, ooh, and we make one change, which is the vowel. I'm gonna change it to E. E. So one original, ooh, variation, E. E. Now the question I'm gonna ask myself is, what differences do I feel in my body when I do this? Okay, so ooh, E, ooh, E. So the major difference I feel, notice how I had to do it like 3, 4, 5 times before I'm able to like really hone in on the difference. That is normal. The differences I'm feeling are the shape of my mouth and the position of my tongue. Ooh, ee, ooh, ee. The larynx doesn't really change because it's already changing a lot, so I didn't really notice a difference in that. For me, it was mostly shape of the lips, shape of the mouth, shape of the tongue, and that was it. But if I made it more breathy, ooh, ooh, Now there's like less adduction. So, ooh, ooh. And I feel actually I have to use a lot more air to do that than I did before, right? I love these kinds of questions. It's like such an interesting investigatory practice to try and connect what you're hearing to what you're feeling and to what is happening in your body. Because I will say that is like the hardest part of any voice practice, is trying to analyze what's friggin' happening. It's like, I get this feedback from people all the time, like, I'm doing my voice practice and I'm not sure if I'm doing it right. And you know, we as voice professionals also rely on your feedback. So even if you see a teacher, you still have to be able to tell them what you're feeling. So I really think it's important to do this kind of practice where you start to hone into what your body is feeling when you make these vocal changes. Also, the voice is like a black box. Like, this is not unique to trans voice. Singers too just don't know what the heck is happening functionally when they're like cisgender singers of any, or trans singers, like of any stripe. We don't know what's happening functionally. So keep doing this investigative work. So the questions were like, what changed when I made a variation? And you can ask yourself that for every variation. You can also ask what was easier to change, what was harder to change, what felt good, what felt bad, what felt euphoric, what made me feel more dysphoric, right? What surprised me. So this is a practice, and I think a lot of people don't really know how to fit this in. It's something that you can just do one time if you want. You don't have to continuously do this. Like, just spend 20 minutes imitating sounds and trying different things and noticing. Or you can do this for 5 minutes 3 times a week and see how it changes over time as your ears open up. So that is the sound journal exercise. I really think it's worth investigating. It's worth checking out. It's a good one. And I just have one slide left. Oops, that's, let me come back to my face here. And that is to say, thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate that you came here and took the time to check out this talk. As I said, if you want more of this type of material, this is exactly what I teach in my courses. And if you are interested in just getting like a taste, well, this is a pretty good taste, honestly, but you could also check out my 1-hour webinar / free beginner class that's on my website, which I'll also link below. But please, like, check out all the freebies that I talked about earlier. I have so many resources and I just want people to access them. The freebies library, the newsletter, the scholarship program, my courses, my YouTube channel. Get into it. So with that, I'll just say that's all for today. I've been Renee, and I hope this helps.
I did feel like I would get ribbon for that, so that was accurate.
I figured you would take it out when I wrote it.
You are in one take Jake mode.
I really feel that way. The longer it takes, the worse my hair looks by the end. So.
It's all for the hair.
That's
baby.
right.